And joining us now from Alexandria, Virginia, is Mary Beth Long. She is a former U.S. Secretary of Defense and a former chair of NATO's Nuclear Committee and a former CIA operations officer. And Mary Beth, let me just draw on your CIA background here, because these details coming out of Iran about this operation are pretty remarkable. I mean, how reliable, how plausible does it seem to you?
Well, you know, the Iranians are speaking to many audiences, and some of their audiences, of course, are domestic. So admitting that a lot of people were involved, or perhaps that the Israelis or whoever the perpetrators were have a presence and a capability within Iran is very difficult for them, which is why you have the hedging the bets of no person was actually on the scene. It all must be electronic. But, oh, by the way, there are small numbers of dissidents that we're worried about. But I think with the precision, the number of individuals that appear to have been involved, technology, I'm sure, played a role. But I think in the real world, everyone knows that this showed the professionalism that we've seen of the Israelis in the past, particularly with the taking of the archives of the nuclear program. And I think Iran knows it's got a problem on its hands.
Right. Of course, I'll stress that Israel has not officially claimed any credit for this operation. We do have to note that, though that is the assumption. Now, of course, this operation has generated quite a lot of debate, political debate here in Israel, but also in Washington about its timing, whether it's meant more try to box more less as a security operation than to try to box in the Biden administration and its Iran policy. Now, you wrote a very strong piece in The Hill back in June where it was about Iran's cyber attacks. You wrote the administration's treatment of Iran as a dangerous and irresponsible international player just gained a strong new argument, talking about the behavior of Iran. So I want to get your response as to the wisdom of this operation, especially the timing of it.
You know, a lot of people are focusing on the impact that the administration activities, to the extent that it played a role, had on the Biden administration. But I think they're missing the larger point. Certainly in successive administrations, at the period in which a president is a lame duck president, and I know in the George W. Bush administration, the question was, what are the responsibilities of an outgoing president to set the table for the next president in dealing with, number one, our enemies writ large, but also enemies that are most likely to take advantage of a transitional period when we're organizing ourselves to conduct an activity. And should an outgoing president be aggressive in taking as much of that off the table as he possibly can? I know that it was certainly consideration when I was in the Bush administration. I think first and foremost, the Trump administration should be given credit for taking, obviously, to the extent it was involved, taking an opportunity to diminish the capability of the Iranians in this important field of its nuclear activities as far as its weapons activity, taking a shot to the extent it was involved, or assisting in taking of the shot, and having an impact on that program. While the Iranians are saying that it didn't have an impact, I think it's a little bit like the Qasem Soleimani hit. It will certainly have an impact. As we all know, Mohsen was the founder of the Ahmed program, which was the nuclear portfolio for the weapons activity. So I think first and foremost, it's a president acting at the end of his administration, and I'm not sure he's done yet, frankly.
Well, let me ask you about that. Is there a certain, though, limit, and this argument has been made, that either the president or the Israeli government should not sort of go over, say, launch a military attack, for example, in order not to create a situation for the incoming administration?
It's a balance. I think there is an equally strong argument that an administration does as much as it can do to take advantage of opportunities and to diminish the threats to the republic as a new administration is coming in. Certainly, it's a balance. You don't want to tie your successor's hands. It's something that is a written rule or unwritten rule. You don't want to tie Biden's hands, but to the extent that any activity could increase the leverage that the next administration has in getting Iran to the table on its nuclear weapons program, I think that there's plenty of latitude.
Including a military strike? I'm trying to pin you down a bit. Would that be going a step too far?
Well, I think things like taking out a launching activity to the extent that it appeared perhaps that Iran was seeking to launch a missile attack or an indirect attack, taking out those capabilities, whether on Iranian soil or through a proxy, which I think is most likely, preemptively limiting those options for the Iranians, I think is fair game.
All right. Well, of course, considering the fact that Iran is discussing retaliation in the wake of this, perhaps those circumstances may yet well present themselves. U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense Mary Beth, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense Mary Beth Long, please stay with us. We're going to come back. We're going out for a brief break. We're going to continue to discuss this subject a little further when